Hello, everybody, and welcome to Command Point. I'm Shane, and it is the seventh day of Kill Team here, and I'm here to talk about Warpcoven, and I'm joined by George, aka Oust. George, how's it going?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk about some Warpcoven here today with you. I mean, they've been out for a while now, and you were pretty much playing them from day one, and you still kind of play them quite a bit today.
Yeah, I've picked them up around January last year, just before the first KTO.
Uh huh.
And I've been playing them on and off ever since. With yeah, some reasonable success here and there. But I think Into the Dark has definitely breathed some new life into the faction. It's been quite fun to explore that.
Nice, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But as a starter, let's say somebody's kind of getting into to Kill Team for the first time, and they're looking at the different factions because there's plenty of them now, and for some reason, whatever reason, Warp Coven has caught their eye, and and they're curious about that team. For this person, how would you sort of describe the play style of Warp Coven in like basic terms?
Okay, so Warpcoven at their core are a toolbox elite team
Yeah.
that's kind of centered around three main pieces, which are the sorcerers of various disciplines.
Hmm.
These operatives can do a bit of everything. They're good at melee. They can do a bit of shooting. They've got lots of support spells, and they can play the objectives really well, just having 13 wounds and being Marines.
Hmm.
And the team is supported by some really good AP shooting, with the Soul Reaper cannon, which is possibly one of the best heavy weapons in the game now,
Yeah.
with the recent data slate change. And also the Sangors as well, which haven't been getting as much love as they should have recently, in my
Okay.
opinion. But they're still pretty good, and they support the team really well.
Nice. So I guess with that answer in mind, what about their playstyle like appealed to you? Like how did you kind of like find yourself really enjoying Warp Coven?
For a few reasons, really. So I think setting aside like the lore and the aesthetics, I think the way they play is like every single mission and matchup kind of presents like a unique challenge.
Hmm.
So if you like list building, theory crafting, there'd be quite a good fit. There'd be something that you'd probably be interested in. So like as I said at the beginning, they're like a real toolbox faction in like
Hmm.
every aspect of their game. Like from building the roster, you've got a few choices there. It's not as deep as let's say 40k, but it's probably one of the some of the deeper roster choices you have in Kill Team. But probably more importantly, like there's a lot of choice for what you muster to the table, what operatives you bring for each mission.
Hmm.
So there's various kind of configurations that you'll kind of play around with and get to know depending on like the faction you're facing, um, the 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 terrain layout if you're playing on open and closed, and also you bring different operatives depending on the mission as well.
Hmm.
So you have like some missions where you need to control objectives, so certain operatives might be better at that, while others you want to kind of focus on tapping points. So there might be different boons and stuff like that which you can focus on. So that's kind of one of the main reasons why they kind of appeal to me. But they really do reward kind of creativity, and they can be quite unpredictable and quite hard to play around for your opponent when played at quite a high level.
Yeah.
Um, so like you can really kind of throw your opponent off guard. There's like a few little kind of mind games you can play with some of their various ploys, which we'll probably go into later. So stuff like kind of schemes of change, which is the discarding tack up one, which can be really strong. Like you're playing with like charge distances. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of like sneaky tricks you can do, which I quite like as a player.
Cool. Awesome. So how about as far as like the difficulty of getting into them, like a learning curve, you could say, for you personally, like how many games did it take before Warp Coven kind of started to click for you and the play pattern started to make a little bit more sense on the table?
Okay, so they're probably one of the most, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, they're probably one of the more complex factions you
Hmm.
can choose to play, especially when you're first starting out. Um, so because I've been playing them for more than a year now, I've kind of learnt the game with them. So it's kind of hard to answer that, but
Yeah.
I'd say that like you probably start winning if you kind of boil everything down, focus on the basics, choose two or three disciplines, and kind of focus on one thing per match to learn. I think it'll probably take about 5 or 6 games to kind of get like a real feel for the faction. but then to really kind of start winning certain matchups, which some of them can be quite difficult. Like I'm learning new stuff now, even like
Yeah.
even like now. So there's like quite a lot of depth to a faction. If you like thinking about a faction, thinking about matchups, there's kind of a lot to explore and to unpack.
Nice. Okay, really cool. And you're not the first person to say that. When I did the Commandos interview just a couple days ago, um, it was kind of the same thing. It was like, well, I learned playing the game while I was learning Commandos, and Warpcoven came out long enough ago that yeah, that kind of does ring true. It's weird to think how long they've been out at this point.
I know it's funny, especially with the Marines updating stuff with intercessors having 14 wounds and stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think they can still kind of play with them. So yeah, like I think when you really start playing well with Warp Coven, you kind of it really kind of benefits from kind of knowing the core mechanics of the game really
Hmm.
well, because they're a team which relies quite a lot on synergy. And
Yeah.
like none of your operatives are as strong individually as like some of the more specialized factions. So like your melee operatives aren't going to be like a melee, like a legionary melee operative who specializes in that, for example. Or your shooting is not quite as good as other factions shooting. So you have to kind of work quite hard to kind of read the board, know what you have to do, and kind of like play on a lot of the kind of core mechanics of the
Yeah.
game, which are kind of focused on positioning, which Warp Coven is actually really, really strong at.
Hmm.
So people see kind of rubrics being quite slow. Um,
Hmm.
Having like the 6 inch like limit to their movement and stuff. But with between some of their kind of movement skills, so you've got like the spell Ephemeral Instability, which is a really quite deep spell.
Yeah.
At the face of it, for those who don't know, it reduces charges and dashes by 1 circle. So at the base level, it's quite strong against people who aren't expecting it or who haven't played around it that much.
Yeah.
But once you kind of get more adept to the faction, you can really start playing with like charge distances, kind of blocking people off, blocking people's options, like how people set up threats on turn 1 or turn 2. So there's like a lot of kind of like subtlety with how you play
Hmm.
with it,
Okay.
and also with stuff like Warp Portal as well. That's a really really strong movement spell. So even though um, the range is you've got to be within 3 inches of a sorcerer um, to benefit from it. You can then move within 6 inches of the sorcerer casting it. So if you take into account base sizes, you can move an operative up to like around 11 inches, which is probably one of the fastest movement capabilities in the game. But it's a little bit clunky. So there's like a lot of things like that where it's like these hidden um, movement abilities which are really strong once you kind of get to know them.
Nice. So how about like matchups wise? Like what would you say that Warp Coven are good against in the meta, and what are they bad against? Like things that you would expect to run into at a tournament.
Um, so I would say they've got a few very bad matchups, which are unfortunately quite common in some of the
Hmm.
more competitive tournaments. So Pathfinders and Open could be quite a challenge,
Yeah.
um, but I guess they're kind of a challenge for everyone. So
Yeah,
it's not really a
that's true.
yep. I think Hunter Clade, even before the buff, they had a few tools which kind of play into um, our weaknesses. So they can turn off rerolls. They've got a few strong melee operatives and shooting.
Yeah.
And they got the Injured Aura, which kind of counteracts some of the stuff that we're kind of relying on. So like
Right.
Relentless and melee, only having 4 melee dice, hitting on 4s for Sangors, hitting on 3s for Sorcerers.
Yeah.
So that can be quite a hard matchup, I think. But in terms of kind of, I think they've got game against all the other factions if you kind of take your time and kind of learn how to read the board and how to play against certain factions. Um, so if there's a potential change to the top of the meta, I think there could be quite opposition to take advantage of that.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, they're definitely a team that rewards skill and that rewards dedication to understanding like the toolbox that you have available to you. Um, so one thing that a lot of new players really struggle with, in particular, especially when they're learning a new faction, is turn one, and what they want to be doing on turn one, not just to keep themselves safe but also to set themselves up for later turns in terms of creating situations of success. And let's kind of focus on open board because Into the Dark it can be a little bit samey. But like on open board, what are your goals on turn one?
Okay, so I think it depends on a lot on who you're actually playing.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of divide their matchups into two. One against the elite teams, where Warpcoven generally takes the kind of the horde role, because they can load up on Zangors and have more activations than your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those matchups would play slightly differently to against the teams that have more activations than you, such as Pathfinders, Vet Guard, Wormblades, or all the hordes and stuff. But general kind of principles is you want to keep your opponent's distances in mind. So you often want to get off an early ephemeral instability
Mm-hmm.
to slow them down. On open boards, flying flux blast is quite a potent
Yeah.
combo that a lot of people have kind of gotten wise to now. It's not
Yeah.
as easy as it once was to kind of catch people out with that, but it's still pretty strong, and they have to play around it. Even sometimes have to eat the blast.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you often want to position. You want to look at some firing lanes and see where you can place your Soul Reaper cannon, which often has a large impact on turn two. Like you don't have. There's quite a common play pattern where you have to choose at the beginning if you think you'll get off a very good shot with the Soul Reaper. Um, Against like elite teams on certain missions, if you spot like a good vantage point, you can often get the turning point one shot off. Other times, it might be beneficial just to walk portal up to advantage, hold off from the shot, and kind of play the position a bit, wait for them to make the move. So like positioning your Soul Reaper is something really important to think about turning point one, whether you want to shoot with them or whether you want to hold off. And then aside from like the um, yeah, just kind of keeping your Zangors safe, kind of measuring charge distances for next turn, and not kind of committing too much and going too crazy. That's kind of how I personally play them. Um, so yeah, I think that's some of the main things to think about turning point one.
Nice. So I'm going to paint a picture for you. Let's say that you're playing at a tournament and you're playing Warpcoven and it's your turn. And I'm walking by and I'm not playing in the tournament. I'm just kind of spectating. And I stop and watch your table and I watch for like a minute or two during your turn. And what to me or what to you is like the coolest, flashiest play that you could do with Warpcoven that would like catch my attention as somebody spectating?
So there are quite a few flashy plays you can do with them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main ones is you can you can almost kind of get up to 6 APL with a sorcerer in some cases.
Okay.
Uh, so you can combine it with the icon bearer for the free psychic power.
Yeah.
There's a boon which gives you a free mission action called Mutant Appendage, and then you can also use a tactical ploy called Schemes of Change that lets you do a free dash after you've activated and flip your order. So you don't need to use the whole 6, but
Mm-hmm.
that's quite a cool flashy
Yeah.
little combo
Or
you
isn't
can
it?
do.
It's Capricious Plan, right?
Which is pan, yeah. Sorry,
Yes. Schemes of
yeah,
Change is the
that's
other
one.
one. That's the
Yep,
tac
yep.
op one. No, I know what
That
you're talking about though.
Yeah, and that's the other big flashy play
Yeah.
that is becoming. I kept it secret, but
I know what you're talking
it's
about.
getting the secret's kind of getting out there now. So I think I'll share with everyone. So in a FAQ, I think it was just before June last year, they changed the wording for schemes to change. So you discard on the attack ups you've revealed, then you have to draw from your discard pile.
Yeah.
But if you draw attack up from your discard pile that has the condition that has to be revealed turn one, you have to draw another one. And if you combine that with the faction attack ops, 2 of them need to be revealed turn one. So
Yeah.
what you can do is you can kind of stack your discard deck to have 3 cards, 2 of which you can't legally draw once the game has started. So
Yeah.
you're guaranteed to draw the third one, which with security is often Plant Banner.
Yeah.
So you can wait until turning point 4, do that, and for 1 CP you can really very easily kind of max out if you position well. Kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But I use it like once every game, even on stuff like Into the Dark, where you have to often take stuff like protect assets. no, not protect assets, the damage limitation.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of mind games for that, which is quite fun as well.
Nice. So usually when I'm playing a team and I'm like learning them, there's usually at least one thing that really sticks out to me. Like once I've played a decent amount of games with them, where it's like, wow, I wish I had realized this 5 games ago. It would have made it way easier for me. So like, what's like a special like sort of secret like level up tip for Warpcoven that you can give some of the viewers?
I would say love your Zangors and learn how to use them, because
Okay.
I think some of them can be really, really strong if you use correct. If you once you position them correctly, and if you don't lose them needlessly, they can do quite a lot to keep your sorcerers safe. Like so, particularly one which I didn't use before until people started mentioning it in the Warpcoven channel in the Command Point Discord. It was the Icon Bearer. I always kind of wrote this off, not thinking it was very good. But the more I kind of developed like a positional kind of style of play on the control missions, the Sangha Icon Bearer is really, really good against a lot of against most factions really, because especially against elites as well, because you can just move it onto the point, and you're automatically contesting whatever they kind of put on there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's use and like learning how to use different Zangors. I think that's probably one of the harder skills to kind of master.
Okay.
Um,
And
and
then it's like, so basically just the Zangors, they're not just warm bodies, I think is what you're trying to say. They are actually useful if you can kind of learn how to utilize those operatives.
yeah, like how I kind of see it is if you like a common combination, especially now after the buff, is going 3 sorcerers, 2 rubrics, 2 Zangors. But if you kind of do this, you have to be a bit more aggressive with your sorcerers.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of the team's power is kind of tied up in these sorcerers, if you kind of lose one too early or without getting value, or if you get unlucky with the roll, it kind of puts a bit more of a burden on your team. So I quite often like taking 4 extra angles, even sometimes 6 against certain factions like Wormblade, because it allows you to kind of screen your sorcerers, kind of keep them safe, and they're kind of just threatening enough that your opponent kind of has to deal with them. And yeah, like it's just like I've kind of got used to playing them, and
Nice.
I think there's like kind of quite a lot of hidden power there. I don't think they quite get the respect they deserve recently.
Cool.
But I know a lot of that's from like aesthetic reasons as well. I know people have got quite a lot of cool proxies and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're thinking of Warpcoven, definitely think about your Sangors, and
Yeah.
if you want to run the base models, if you want to
Very cool.
run something else, yep.
I've got one more question. It's possibly the most important question I'm asking everybody. Do you have a favorite Christmas song? And if so, what is it?
Oh, I don't know.
Ooh.
Caught me off guard.
I know. I'm getting a lot of different answers for this one, so I mean, I'm kind of curious to say what you come up with. Like, what?
I'm not the biggest fan of. I don't really do Christmas. We got. I'm trying to think. This is tough, man.
It's
You've
a
stumped me.
tough one. I know I
Yeah,
sprung
yeah,
this
yeah.
on you. I'm springing it on everybody. So
I'll have to get back to you with that one.
all right, you
yeah.
get back to me on that because this is
Yeah.
really important. But thank you as always, George. It's a pleasure. It's good to have you on. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and as always, viewers, listeners, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And special shout out to everybody over at patreon.com/commandpoint and everybody over on the YouTube membership program. You guys are the best. And as always, this is Shane from Command Point talking about Warpcoven with George and signing off.